Margaret Hill had spent most of her 65 years in the soft rhythms of Savannah, Georgia, a city where moss dripped from oak trees and life moved to the sound of church bells and ocean wind. She was a retired college counselor, once admired for her calm wisdom and her ability to listen without judgment. Since her husband Richard's death 6 years ago, her days had slowed into a peaceful routine. Morning walks to the farmer's market, afternoons tending to her small rose garden, and evenings with her cat, Molly, curled up by the window. The house she and Richard had built decades ago stood as a quiet museum of their life together. Framed photographs on every wall, their laughter caught in frozen time. She often caught herself talking to his picture while cooking dinner, as if he were still sitting at the dining table with his favorite newspaper and that half-smile he always wore. Her children, Ethan and Claire, visited often, making her feel that the emptiness left by Richard's passing was somehow still filled with love. Ethan, the eldest, was a financial analyst living just 2 hours away in Atlanta, while Claire, her daughter, taught at a local elementary school and dropped by every other evening with her contagious laughter. Margaret often told herself that she had done well. She had raised kind, grounded children, kept her home warm and welcoming, and carried Richard's memory gracefully. But deep inside, she sometimes wished he had told her more about the things that weighed on him before he died. There were moments when she caught herself wondering about his silences, the trips he took for work, the letters she never found, and the smell of perfume that once clung faintly to his coat. Still, she brushed away those thoughts, convincing herself that love didn't need every answer. That quiet evening, as the golden light faded through her lace curtains, she began preparing for something that always brought her joy. A family dinner. Her children were the anchor of her life. Ethan Hill, at 38, carried himself like his father, disciplined, reserved, and always in control. He had inherited Richard's calm eyes and quiet ambition. He lived in Atlanta with his wife, Lauren, a woman Margaret admired for her politeness, though she sometimes found her distant and hard to read. Claire, on the other hand, was the light in every room she entered. At 35, she still lived nearby, teaching second graders and bringing her students' drawings for Margaret to hang on the refrigerator. Margaret often joked that Ethan was her logic and Claire was her heart. They balanced her world perfectly. She had built her identity around being their mother, the steady voice of reason, the soft place to land, the one who made everything right when life turned cruel. Losing Richard had been unbearable, but her children's love kept her breathing. Every Sunday, they came over for dinner, and she cherished those hours more than anything. She would wake up early, bake Claire's favorite lemon pie, polish the old silverware, and set the table exactly the way Richard used to like: candles, cloth napkins, soft jazz playing in the background. Her home became the meeting point for laughter, arguments, and forgiveness. But that particular Sunday felt different, though she couldn't explain why. The morning light seemed heavier, the silence thicker. As she arranged the flowers in the vase, she paused for a moment and looked at Richard's picture. "You'd be proud of them," she whispered softly. "They've done well." She smiled faintly, unaware that the evening ahead would shatter everything she believed about her perfect little family. That Sunday evening began beautifully, like a scene out of an old memory. The sun dipped low, painting the Savannah sky in gold and rose. The table was set, the roast chicken rested on the counter, and the sweet scent of lemon pie filled the air. Claire arrived first, her laughter echoing through the hallway as she hugged her mother tightly. "It smells amazing in here, Mom," she said, slipping off her shoes. Margaret chuckled, smoothing Claire's hair. "Well, it's your birthday. You deserve the best." A few minutes later, Ethan and Lauren arrived, carrying a bouquet of lilies and a small wrapped box. Ethan kissed his mother's cheek, and for a moment, everything felt right. Dinner was perfect. The conversation flowed easily. The clinking of forks and the warmth of candlelight filled the room. They talked about work, about Claire's students, about Ethan's new project in Atlanta. Margaret watched them, her eyes full of quiet pride. For a fleeting moment, she thought, this is happiness. This is all I ever wanted. After dinner, they gathered in the living room with coffee and cake, laughter bouncing off the walls. Claire teased Ethan about his dad jokes, and Lauren smiled quietly, sipping her wine. Everything seemed ordinary, peaceful, like every other family gathering they'd had for years. But peace has a fragile nature. It often ends just before you realize it was ever there. When the laughter subsided and Claire left to take a phone call outside, Lauren glanced at Margaret, her expression unreadable. She took a deep breath and said softly, "Mrs. Hill, can we talk for a moment?" Margaret followed Lauren into the kitchen, still smiling, unaware of what was coming. The kitchen lights felt harsh after the warm glow of the dining room. Lauren stood by the counter, her hands trembling slightly as she set her glass down. "Is something wrong?" Margaret asked, gently, concerned. Lauren's eyes filled with tears before she could speak. "There's something I need to tell you," she whispered. "I can't keep it to myself anymore." Margaret frowned, confusion replacing calm. "What is it, dear?" she asked, stepping closer. Lauren's lips quivered, her voice breaking. "I'm pregnant. With Richard's child." The words hit Margaret like a blow to the chest. She froze, her mind refusing to understand. "What did you just say?" she stammered. Lauren's tears streamed down her face as she nodded. "It happened years ago. Before he died. I didn't mean for it to—" But Margaret couldn't hear any more. The sound in the room faded. All she could hear was the pounding of her own heart. Her husband, gone for 6 years, the man she had buried, mourned, loved, and now his name, spoken in a way that desecrated every memory she had clung to. She gripped the counter to steady herself, her knuckles white. Her throat went dry, and her knees threatened to give way. Lauren's sobs filled the silence, but Margaret's mind was far away, trapped between disbelief and horror. The world she had built so carefully began to crumble in that single moment. When Margaret finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "That's impossible," she said, shaking her head. "Richard's been gone for 6 years. This can't be true." Lauren wept harder, pleading, "I know how it sounds. I never wanted this to happen. It was a mistake. A terrible mistake. I've carried it for years." Margaret felt dizzy, gripping the counter for balance. The kitchen seemed to spin around her. Her heart pounded against her ribs, and a cold numbness crawled through her body. She thought of Richard, the man who had held her through storms, the father of her children, the person she trusted more than anyone. Now his image shattered in her mind like broken glass. "You're lying," she whispered, tears filling her eyes. "You have to be lying." But Lauren shook, her head, her face pale and full of shame. "I wish I were," she said, "but I couldn't hide it any longer." Margaret backed away slowly, unable to bear the sight of her. She turned toward the window, staring into the dark night, her breath trembling. The laughter from the living room still echoed faintly. Her children, unaware that their family was falling apart just a few steps away. Margaret wanted to scream, to run, to wake up from this nightmare. But she stayed silent, her heart splintering inside her chest. At that moment, she realized something terrible. The past she thought she understood was gone forever. That night, I couldn't sleep. The sound of the ceiling fan above my bed felt louder than ever, like it was spinning through my thoughts. I kept hearing Lauren's trembling voice. "I'm pregnant with your husband's child." Those words replayed in my mind again and again, like a broken record I couldn't turn off. I stared at the ceiling, my hands gripping the sheets. My husband Richard had been gone for almost 10 years now. How could something from the past still have the power to destroy my peace today? I thought of Ethan and Claire, their faces, their laughter at dinner just hours ago. How could I ever look them in the eye if what Lauren said was true? As the night deepened, I found myself walking around the house in silence. I stopped at Richard's study, the one room I hadn't touched since he passed away. It still smelled faintly of his aftershave and old books, his files, his photographs, his old wristwatch, all frozen in time, untouched by truth. My eyes filled with tears as I whispered, "Why, Richard? Why would you do this to us?" My fingers brushed over a picture of him smiling beside our children at Ethan's graduation. He looked proud, honest, loving, the man I believed in for 40 years. But now, everything felt tainted. I sat by the window until the first light of dawn crept in through the blinds. Birds were chirping outside, the same peaceful sounds that used to comfort me. But that morning, they felt hollow. My life had changed in one whisper, and there was no going back. I needed to know if Lauren's words were real or just some cruel, desperate mistake. I promised myself I would find the truth, no matter how painful it might be. The next morning, after forcing down a cup of black coffee, I began searching through old photo albums and storage boxes in the attic. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. Maybe some sign, some proof that my husband wasn't the man I feared he might have been. Dust coated everything, and the air felt thick with memories. I flipped through photos of birthdays, picnics, and Christmas mornings. Every smile looked too perfect now. Every glance between Richard and Lauren too suspicious. Then, in one faded album, I saw it. A picture from a family picnic at Forsyth Park. Richard was sitting on the blanket, laughing. Next to him sat Lauren, her hand resting gently on his arm. They weren't looking at the camera, they were looking at each other. Something in their eyes made my heart twist. It wasn't just a friendly glance. It was familiarity, intimacy. My hands trembled as I held the photo closer. Could this really mean something, or was I just seeing what my broken heart wanted to see? Still, the doubt grew stronger inside me. I remembered how Richard used to visit Ethan's house often when Ethan was away on business trips. I used to be happy about it, thinking he was spending time with his daughter-in-law and helping around the house. Now every memory of those visits made me feel sick. I tucked the photo inside a small envelope, my decision forming slowly but firmly. I couldn't confront anyone yet, not without proof. I needed facts, not emotions. And the more I thought about it, the more determined I became. I was going to uncover the truth, even if it shattered everything I knew. That afternoon, I invited Lauren over, pretending it was just for tea. She looked nervous when she arrived, her hands fidgeting as she sat across from me. The silence between us was heavy. I finally spoke, my voice calm but steady. "Lauren," I said, "what you told me last night? Was it true, or were you just upset?" Her eyes filled with tears almost instantly. "I didn't mean for it to come out that way," she whispered. "I just couldn't hold it anymore." "Tell me everything," I said quietly. "From the beginning." She took a deep breath and began to explain. "It happened years ago," she said, "when Ethan was working overseas. She felt lonely, isolated, and Richard had been there often to check on her, to help with the house, to make sure she was okay. One evening, she said, they were both drinking wine after dinner. They talked for hours about family, loss, and loneliness. One thing led to another, and before she could think clearly, a line had been crossed. As she spoke, tears streamed down her face. "It was one night," she said, her voice shaking. "I hated myself for it. I wanted to tell Ethan, but I couldn't destroy him like that. When Richard passed away, I thought the secret died with him." My stomach turned. I wanted to scream, to throw her out of my house, to erase the image of my husband with my son's wife. But I couldn't move. My heart ached too much. I could only whisper, "You betrayed my family, Lauren. You betrayed me." She sobbed uncontrollably, begging for forgiveness, but I couldn't hear her anymore. My mind was numb. My world had tilted, and everything I believed about my life had become a lie. After Lauren left, I sat alone at the kitchen table for hours, staring at the same spot on the wall. My heart was shattered, but a small voice inside me kept repeating, "You need the truth." I needed something concrete, something undeniable. I couldn't live on half confessions and guilt anymore. That's when I thought of a DNA test. The idea terrified me at first. What would I even do with the results? But I couldn't rest until I knew. I contacted a private lab online and ordered a testing kit. I decided to collect samples quietly. Mine, Lauren's, and when the baby was born, the child's. It was wrong, I knew. But after all the lies, what else could I do? Every day, I walked through my home pretending everything was normal. Ethan was still unaware of anything. He'd call sometimes, talking about work, about baby names, about plans for the nursery. Each word stabbed at me, knowing the truth that hovered over us like a storm waiting to break. At night, I'd sit by Richard's old armchair, holding his photo, whispering, "If you did this, I'll never forgive you." The silence in the room always answered back, and that silence hurt more than any confession ever could. Weeks later, the envelope arrived. It was small and unassuming, yet heavier than anything I'd ever held. My hands trembled as I opened it. The paper inside felt cold, the printed words sharp and merciless. My eyes scanned the report, once, twice, 3 times. I couldn't believe what I was reading. The unborn child was indeed Richard's. My late husband had fathered his own son's wife's child. I dropped the paper onto the floor, my breath catching. The room spun around me, but as my tears blurred the ink, I noticed another section of the report, a comparison result I hadn't expected to see. Ethan's DNA didn't match Richard's either. My mind froze. For a moment, I thought I had read it wrong. I looked again. Ethan was not Richard's biological son. My husband, who I had trusted for over 40 years, had betrayed me long before Lauren ever entered our lives. I sank to the floor, the report slipping from my hands. I cried harder than I ever had in my life, louder than the night I lost Richard, deeper than the pain of losing my marriage. My entire world, my children, my love story. None of it was real. Everything I had built my identity on had just collapsed into ashes. I sat there for hours, the report beside me, sunlight slowly fading from the window. For the first time, I realized that sometimes the truth doesn't set you free. It breaks you completely before you can even begin to heal. I sat there on the cold wooden floor for what felt like forever. The DNA report lay beside me, its words seared into my soul. My body trembled as the truth sank deeper with every passing second. Richard had betrayed me not once, but twice. The man I'd called my husband, my partner, my forever, had built a life with me on lies. Ethan wasn't even his biological son. That meant, for 38 years, I'd loved a child who wasn't his, and Richard had never said a word. How could he smile at Ethan's graduation, hold him as a baby, tell him stories at bedtime, knowing the truth all along? The betrayal ran so deep that I felt physically ill. I stood up, gripping the edge of the table to steady myself. My heart ached for Ethan. He was innocent in all this. He had no idea his entire identity was about to be shaken apart. But then another thought hit me. If Ethan wasn't Richard's son, then whose was he? The question burned through my mind. Did Richard know? Did he ever confront me? Or was our whole marriage just two people hiding from different truths? I sat on the couch, clutching the report. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Claire's laughter echoed from her childhood photos on the wall. My beautiful daughter, so pure, so full of kindness. She didn't deserve this. None of them did. But I knew I couldn't bury it. Lies had already destroyed too much. It was time to face the storm, no matter how violent it would be. The next morning, I sat by the window, staring out at the grey Savannah sky. Rain tapped softly against the glass, and the sound reminded me of the countless mornings Richard and I had shared coffee together, mornings that now felt poisoned. I wondered if he ever felt guilt, even for a second. Had he looked at me across the table and seen the woman he once loved, or just the woman he'd fooled? I opened an old box of letters we had written to each other during our early years of marriage. His words were full of promises. Forever yours. You're my home. You're my truth. I laughed bitterly through my tears. His truth was a carefully built lie. Each letter now felt like a blade twisting deeper in my chest. But as I dug through the old papers, I found something strange. A hospital envelope from years ago, tucked inside an old scrapbook. I didn't remember putting it there. My hands trembled as I pulled it out. Inside was a medical form, dated before Ethan's birth. Richard's name wasn't listed as father. It was blank. My heart raced. Could it be that I was the one who had hidden something first? I stared at my own signature at the bottom of the form. Memories came rushing back. A lonely year when Richard had been away on business for months, and I'd made a terrible mistake with someone from work. I had buried it deep, convincing myself it never happened, that Ethan was Richard's. I dropped the paper. My knees went weak. Suddenly, it made sense why Richard had stayed silent, why he never questioned Lauren's confession. He had betrayed me, yes, but I had betrayed him first. The guilt hit me like a tidal wave. We had both built a family on secrets neither of us had the courage to confront. I knew what I had to do. That evening, I called Ethan and Claire home. I told them it was urgent. The rain hadn't stopped, and thunder rumbled in the distance as they arrived. We sat in the living room, the same one that had once been filled with laughter and warmth. Now it felt like a courtroom. They could tell something was wrong. Claire was the first to ask, "Mum, what's going on?" I looked at both of them. My beautiful children, the reason I had survived Richard's death, the reason I still breathed. And I broke. I told them everything. Lauren's confession, the DNA test, Richard's betrayal, and then my own secret from decades ago. Ethan stared at me in disbelief. His face turned pale, then red. "So you're saying Dad wasn't my father?" His voice cracked as he spoke. I nodded slowly, tears blurring my vision. Claire gasped, covering her mouth, crying silently beside me. Ethan stood up, pacing the floor. "All these years, Mom? You both lied to me my whole life?" His voice was full of pain and anger. I tried to reach for him, but he stepped back. "Don't," he said, his voice breaking. "I need to go." And then he walked out into the rain without another word. I sat there in silence, the sound of the storm outside matching the one inside me. Claire held my hand, trembling, and whispered, "Mum, what do we do now?" I couldn't answer. I had destroyed everything. The truth had come out, but instead of setting us free, it had left us all drowning. The days that followed were unbearable. Ethan didn't call. He didn't text. The silence in the house felt suffocating. I spent my mornings staring out the window, hoping to see his car pull up. Claire came by often, trying to keep me company, but even she couldn't hide the sadness in her eyes. She missed her brother. I missed my son. Lauren gave birth during that time, a baby boy. I saw photos of him on social media, tiny, innocent, wrapped in a blue blanket. I felt nothing but heartbreak. That child carried my husband's blood, my family's sin, our legacy of mistakes. Nights were the worst. I'd sit in Richard's old armchair, holding the DNA report in one hand and his picture in the other. I talked to him sometimes, whispering into the emptiness. "You should have told me," I'd say. "We could have faced the truth together." But I realized, deep down, we both chose lies because we were afraid. Afraid to lose what little love we had left. Weeks turned into months. The house that once overflowed with family dinners and laughter now echoed with nothing but regret. I prayed every night for Ethan to forgive me, even if he never came home again. 3 months later, I heard a knock on the door. When I opened it, Ethan stood there, soaked from the rain, holding a small bundle in his arms. Lauren's baby. My heart stopped. He looked tired, older somehow, but there was softness in his eyes I hadn't seen before. He stepped inside without a word and handed me the baby. "His name is James," he said quietly. I looked down at the child, innocent, peaceful, unaware of the chaos he was born into. My arms trembled as I held him. "He's beautiful," I whispered. Ethan nodded, his voice low. "I thought I'd hate him, Mum, but I don't. He didn't choose any of this. None of us did." Tears filled my eyes. I looked at my son, the boy who had every reason to walk away forever, and saw forgiveness instead. "I can't change the past," he said, "but I can choose what comes next." "I don't want our family to end in anger," I reached out, touching his face. "You're a better man than we ever were," I said through tears. That night, as I rocked little James to sleep, I finally understood. The truth had destroyed our illusions, but it had also given us something real, the chance to rebuild, not on lies or guilt, but on love. I whispered to the baby, "Forgiveness is how families survive what truth destroys." And for the first time in a long while, I felt peace.